Okay, so today we're going to take a look at configuring controllers in Microsoft Flight Simulator. When you launch into the game, you come into this screen with the world map and the current Spotlight event and a couple of other bits and pieces like the marketplace on the front page. If you look at the top of the screen, there are three options: welcome, profile and options. So you want to go to options, and then the far right option here is the control options. So this is where you will configure controllers for Flight Simulator. This page is the same page you see when you press escape while you're flying. So the escape key on the keyboard pops this page open, and obviously you get a resume button at the bottom left if you're flying. If you're in the menu, you just get a go back option. So if we go into control options, the first thing to note when you go into control options is every device that is plugged in that the simulator can see, or that Windows can see I should say, will be listed across the top. So in this case we've got the keyboard, the mouse, the joystick, which is an A320 pilot joystick, and the throttle quadrant. So to see what is configured on a particular device, you can click on that device and then you can open out any of the sections within it, and bear in mind there's a filter here that says assigned. So if we open this out, it's only showing us things that are assigned, for example. So there's the camera views, there's radio, there's miscellaneous, there's all kinds of things that's in here. We're going to leave all of the keyboard mappings alone because I think they're pretty straightforward out of the box, and we don't want to go and change how the simulator behaves. We just want to make our new controllers that we've plugged in work. So we will click at the top of the screen on the joystick, for example. When you look in the sensitivity button, that will show you the various axes of your joystick, and when you move them around you can see the dots moving. Yeah? So what's going on here is across the bottom of each graph you've got the amount you are deflecting the joystick, and up and down the graph you're getting the output of having done that. Yeah? So if you it's a bit of a bit difficult to imagine, but when you are moving right and left, for example, on the x-axis, you are sending between 0 to -1, which is banking left, and from 0 to +1, which is banking right. So it's a bit of a head struggle to figure out exactly what's going on here. But the way to think about it is across the bottom is the amount of throw in your hand, and up the side is the amount of output to the simulator. Yeah? So you've got the x-axis, the y-axis. If you've got a twist grip, you'll have a z-axis as well. And if you've got a slider on your joystick, you'll also have that. So notice that the sensitivity controls are nothing to do with mapping anything yet. It's just to say, how is this particular joystick mapping when we throw it around to what comes out to the simulator? So notice we can move the sensitivity bars around, so we can turn this into a curve. So if we say -50% on the sensitivity, then it turns it into a curve. We'll leave it at 49, it really doesn't matter. Or can we get it to 50? It's sometimes really finicky to get it to the exactly right numbers. So if we say 50%, we get a curve. Yeah, and obviously the higher the percentage, the more that becomes curved, and it flattens out the middle. You can set a dead zone as well. So you can say how much around the middle do I want the joystick to, or do I want the game to not pay any attention to before it starts reacting. Yeah, so we can leave that on a very low number usually. So we'll say our dead zone will be, say, 2%, and we'll say 2% for the pitch as well. Yeah, so tiny amounts of joystick movement therefore won't cause aileron or elevator movement. The more difficult one to understand is neutral. So what we're saying here is, bear in mind this one is your left and right amount. So you're offsetting where the center is. So you end up with a the 0 point is now, this makes more sense for a throttle than for a stick. We can set, we'll do this in terms of the throttle so you get some idea what's going on with this. So I've got a throttle here. It doesn't help that it is reversed, but we'll just bear with me for a moment. So when I push it to one end or the other, it's in a dead straight line at the moment. If I move neutral, you can see I'm saying when I'm at a quarter of the throw, that's almost all of my movement is allowed along the rest of the throw. So the first quarter only outputs that much, and then the rest of it. So the ideal reason for doing this, and you will see this on a default controller configuration that's configured for the Airbus, it will have massive curves and massive neutral settings to offset where the reverse thrust kicks in on the stick. But on the study level planes, you tend to be able to configure the stick configure the throttle anyway, so you can set where it is. If you have got configuration through something like the A320, you can set this to 0 and set everything else to 0 and just have a straight line, and then you configure it in the aeroplane. But if the aeroplane isn't configurable, you can mess around with the neutral setting to figure out where you want the throttle to be just before it gets into reverse thrust, and how much of the throttle throw you want left to control the rest of the movement through the throttle. So you've got dead zones at the extremities, which does what it says on the tin. You can cut off the amount at the far end. So dead zone in the middle is here, and then dead zone at the extremities, you're cutting off the far end of the throw. So you're not using the whole throw of your stick, for example. Just get that back to 0. And can I get it back to 0 is the question. There we go. Reactivity doesn't show up directly on the graph. This is done by the simulator itself. And all it means is, will the simulator react as fast as we press the controller? So if we suddenly snap to one side, the ailerons will do that, for example, instantly. So that's hitting the aileron straight away. If you turn the reactivity down, we might push the joystick suddenly to one side, but the actual elevator on the plane will smoothly flow over there. Yeah, so it's how quickly does the game react to you hitting the controls. So you can see in my case, I let the game react as fast as I can go. So if I want to go and fling the controls around, the ailerons or elevators or rudder or whatever are going to react the moment I do it. So that's sensitivity. So to find out what is mapped on the various buttons on your joystick, there are some nice tricks. Because the first thing you're going to want to do probably when you plug a new stick in and you come in here and you select it, is you're going to want to find out what is mapped on the buttons. Yeah? Now I'm just out of interest, I'm going to configure this particular joystick right now because I've reset my profile. We'll get to profiles in a moment. So I want to find out what have I got mapped. So at the moment it's saying assigned. So if I click on any of these headings, I can see what has been assigned at the moment. And you can see there's a couple of different things in here if we break out the menus. The axes have already been assigned and I'm quite happy with those. So we've got the elevators, the ailerons and the rudder. Yeah. If I wanted to change one of those, I can go and change it, but we're going to just do buttons for the moment. So the game usually gets the axes right. If you don't like what it's chosen, you can go and choose your own. I'll just do it with this. So this was right axis Z. So if I click in here, you can see what has already been assigned, and we can say, well, we want to put something else in. So if I twist this, it's picked up, I've pressed right axis Z. But I may not want it to react to what I did. So rather than clicking start scanning, I could actually select. So I can go down here and find R axis Z. And there it is. So you have both, and we can validate. You have to validate every choice you make. So you can either do things by demonstrating it by pressing the button or choosing it from the drop down menu. So autopilot. I don't want button, well, I'm not sure what button 4 is. Yeah. Okay, I think the sim has just paused on me, which is wonderful. Yeah, it has. So we'll just hang on for a moment. if I just stir the stick, we'll see the bar start moving. This just proves the problem with the sim pausing happens in the menu and the simulator. There we go, it's just come back to life. Autopilot. So if I click in here, at the moment the autopilot toggle is set to joystick button number 4. So if I click in here, I can say what button I really want, and it is number 4. So then I can validate that. I don't want the throttle on this controller, so I can go in there and I can type anything, to be honest, because I'm going to go and get rid of it. So I've clear the current input and validate. Yeah, and that's got rid of my mapping on this joystick for anything to do with the throttle. So now I've got a ton of buttons that I've not used on the joystick, because all I've set up is the axes and the autopilot button that was already mapped to something else. So what I can do is search by a name of a control. So say I want to do the flaps. I can type flaps into this box and it shows me automatically all of the settings that are available for flaps that I can map to things. So I could say I want to increase and decrease flaps on 2 buttons on my joystick. So if I say I want to increase flaps, I'll go and click in here and I can start scanning and then press the button I want. So it happens to be joystick button number 8, which is this one here. And then I can validate that, and that's done it. If I want to decrease flaps, I might want to press the button in front of that. So down flaps, up flaps. So that was increase. We want to decrease flaps, which is over here. So we scan for the buttons and press it, and we validate. Okay. And you can go on like that through all of the controls you might want to map. So we might want to say we want the propeller. And we've got, what have we got in here? Propeller axes. We've got increase propeller pitch. So if we want to increase the propeller pitch, we might want to press button number 13 on this side and validate it. And then if we wanted to decrease the propeller pitch, we can scan and press the button we want to do that and validate it. So where this gets interesting, you can see propeller pitch as an example has 4 different propeller pitches. The game out of the box supports aircraft with up to 4 engines. So you get to set 4 lots of propeller pitch, 4 different axes if you really want for the throttles, 4 different fuel mixtures. So anything where it makes sense to do it, you can set 4 individual ones. Where you only want one, you can just go, or where you only have one controller, you can just set the individual setting instead of each of those. Hopefully that makes sense. Okay. So now we've done that. So we've done the pitch, we've done the flaps. We might want to do spoilers. So if we come back in here and put spoilers, and we'll say extend and retract spoilers. So extend spoilers we're going to put on a button and validate it, and retract spoilers we're going to put on a button and validate it. So you can keep going with this all day really. The final one we'll do is fuel mixture. Fuel. So have we got a fuel mixture or engine condition, it's sometimes known as, isn't it? So we want rich. So if we type rich and see what happens, rich, set mixture rich. So we can click in there and we can say rich is going to be this button here, validate. Actually no, let's go for a slightly different button. So we can clear that one and say that one, validate. And then we would have to look for lean for the opposite, wouldn't we? Set mixture lean. Start scanning, press our button and validate. So you can carry on like this all day long, really, setting the various buttons on your controller. The final one I'm going to do is the hat switch. I don't use the hat switch on the joystick, which is this one at the top, for views. I use it for the trim. So if I search for trim, you can see I can set the trim up. Elevator trim, nose up. So I will make it, when the mouse appears, where's the mouse gone? Elevator trim, nose up. And I will start scanning, and I will pull back on the point of view hat and validate. Elevator trim, nose down. And I will push forwards on the hat. Aileron trim left, and I will push left on the hat. Aileron trim right, and I will push right on the hat. So that's done. So that's all of my changes that I wanted to make, and I can save them. And that's done. And now we can go flying, and the controller is going to behave exactly as we've told it to. Now the difference comes in, what if we've got different airplanes that have got different sets of controls needed, so we want to have different controller configurations. That's why there is a link at the bottom of the screen saying Preset Manager. So the classic example of this is the throttle quadrant. So on some planes that might have two engines, and I want to use one stick per engine for the throttle. On another plane it might have a throttle at one engine, and a throttle and pitch would make more sense. Throttle and propeller pitch. So I could maybe have one stick for the throttle and the other stick configured to use for propeller pitch. So obviously you want it to be different for different planes. So you can have what are called profiles in the control options. If we go and look in Preset Manager, it relates to this. Underneath each device name there is a profile name. So this one obviously doesn't have a profile, so it's just got this TA320 pilot profile, which is like the default. This one, you will notice I've got lots of different profiles for different airplanes within the game. And say I wanted to get rid of that F-22 one, for example, I can go to the Preset Manager, and then you get your buttons to do what you want with profiles. So I could duplicate this one. So you can start with a base profile and duplicate it to make different ones, and it'll prompt for a name and so on and so forth. So the idea being, you can make new profiles, you can get rid of old ones. So F-22 I'm not using at the moment. Yes, I want to get rid of it. So it goes back to default, for example, and then we've got one for the Twin Otter. There's one, again, one that I've saved just with the same name instead of using the word default. I've got a DC-6, I've got an A320, and so you can see you can configure them all differently. So for each one you would just go and choose the one on the profile that you want, and then the rest of the screen here is going to reflect that profile. So that it's the controller you have configured and the profile you have chosen that you are setting up here. So hopefully that makes sense. So you can see the Savage Cub, the Kodiak. So you can see on the Kodiak I've set up rudder trim on some of the buttons. Okay, so there you go. That is basically how you can configure the controls in Flight Simulator. So you can search for aspects of the aircraft that you can configure by name. You can search by the input. So if you're not sure what a particular button is doing on a joystick, for example, you can search by input and press the button, and it will tell you if there's anything mapped to it. You can also select an input. So all of the inputs available on that joystick you can go and choose. So for example, we could say, let's go and choose joystick button number 1. It's got arm auto throttle. So that's the one on the left side of the left throttle stick in this example. So yeah, and again you can filter them. So you can filter the choices being shown. So if we take that filter away, we can see all of them, or just the essential ones, or the ones that we've actually mapped. Yeah, so it's pretty straightforward. Once you're happy with what you've done, or that you've changed profile maybe to choose a different profile to fly with, you say apply and save, and you just go back and then your controller is as you have just set it. So I guess the big takeaway is that you can have multiple controllers and you can configure them multiple ways, and then when you go into an aircraft you can choose the controller configuration you want to use. And I guess the other nice takeaway is that sensitivity section where you can configure the axes on the controller and how the axes are tuned, and again that is stored in the profile, so that's per profile. Okay, so I'm going to leave it there. Hopefully that's been helpful and taken away some of the mysteries of what's going on in the controller configuration. So remember, you don't really need to touch the keyboard or the mouse. The only ones you'll need to change are your controllers, so when you plug a controller in, a new section will appear at the top. Okay, that's it. I'll stop recording there.